22.3 Unemployment and full employment. In this chapter, we study frictional unemployment, structural unemployment, cyclical unemployment, natural unemployment, and unemployment and real GDP. There is always someone without a job who is searching for one, so there is always some unemployment. The key reason is that the labor market is constantly churning. New jobs are created and old jobs die, and some people move into the labor force, some more out of it. This churning creates unemployment. We distinguish three types of unemployment: frictional unemployment, structural unemployment, cyclical unemployment. Frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment is unemployment that arises from people entering and leaving the labor force, from quitting jobs to find better ones, and from the ongoing creation and destruction of jobs from normal labor turnover. Frictional unemployment is a permanent and healthy phenomenon in a dynamic growing economy. There is an unending flow of people into and out of the labor force as people move through the stages of life, from being in school to finding a job to working, perhaps to becoming unhappy with a job and looking for a new one, and finally to retiring from full-time work. There is also an unending process of job creation and job destruction as new firms are born, firms expand and contract, and some firms fail and go out of business. The flow into and out of the labor force and the process of job creation and job destruction create the need for people to search for jobs and for businesses to search for workers. Businesses don't usually hire the first person who applied for a job, and unemployed people don't usually take the first job that comes their way. Instead, both firms and works spend time searching for what they believe will be the best available match. By this process of search, people can match their own skills and interest with the available jobs and find a satisfying job and a good income. Structural unemployment. Structural unemployment is the unemployment that arises when changes in technology or international competition change the skills needed to perform jobs or change the location of jobs. Structural unemployment usually lasts longer than frictional unemployment because workers must retain or possibly relocate to find a new job. For example, when banks introduced an automatic teller machine ATM in the 1970s, many bank teller jobs were destroyed. Meanwhile, new jobs for life insurance salespeople and retail clerks were created. The former bank tellers remained unemployed several months until they moved, retrained, and got one of these new jobs. Structural unemployment is painful, especially for older workers for whom the best available option might be to retire early but with a lower income than they had expected. Sometimes the amount of structural unemployment is small. At other times, it is large, and at such times, structural unemployment can become a serious long-term problem. It was especially large during the late 1970s and early 1980s. For example, job loss to computer technology. Cyclical unemployment. The fluctuating unemployment over the business cycle, higher than the normal unemployment at a business cycle trough and lower than normal unemployment at a business cycle peak, is called cyclical unemployment. A worker who is laid off because the economy is in recession and who gets rehired some months later when the expansion begins has experienced cyclical unemployment. Natural unemployment. Natural unemployment is unemployment that arises from frictions and structural change when there is no cyclical unemployment, when all the unemployment is frictional and structural. Natural unemployment is a percentage of the labor force is called the natural unemployment rate. Natural unemployment rate is when economy is at full employment. Full employment, there is no cyclical unemployment or equivalency when all the unemployment is frictional or structural. At full employment, the unemployment rate equals natural unemployment rate. The natural unemployment rate is influenced by many factors, but the most important one are the age distribution of the population, the pace of structural change, the real wage rate, unemployment benefits. The age distribution of the population. An economy with a young population has lots of new job seekers every year and has a high level of frictional unemployment. An economy with an aging population has fewer new job seekers and a low level of frictional unemployment. The pace of structural change. The pace of structural change is sometimes low. The same jobs using the same machines remain in place for many years, but sometimes the technological upheaval sweeps aside the old ways, wipes out millions of jobs, and makes the skills once used to perform these jobs obsolete. The amount of structural unemployment fluctuates with the pace of technological change. The change is driven by fierce international competition, especially from fast changing Asian economies. A high level of structural unemployment is present in many parts of the United States only. The real wage rate. The natural employment rate is influenced by the level of real wage rate. Anything that arises the real wage rate above the market equilibrium level creates a surplus of labor and increases the natural unemployment rate. The real wage rate might exceed the market equilibrium level for two reasons: a minimum wage and an efficiency wage. A federal minimum wage creates unemployment because it is set above the going market wage to enable firms to attract the most productive workers, get them to work hard, and discourage them from quitting. When firms set their wage above the going market wage, some workers would like to work for these firms but can't get jobs. Unemployment benefits. Unemployment benefits increase the natural unemployment rate by lowering the opportunity cost of job search. European countries have more generous unemployment benefits and higher natural unemployment rates than the United States. Extending unemployment benefits raises the natural unemployment rate. There is no controversy about the existence of natural unemployment rate, nor is there disagreement that natural unemployment rate changes. But economists don't know its exact size or the extent to which it fluctuates. The Congressional Budget Office estimates natural unemployment rate, and its estimate for 2013 was 6%, about 80% of the actual unemployment rate in that year. Unemployment and GDP. Cyclical unemployment is a fluctuating unemployment over the business cycle, unemployment that increases during a recession and decreases during an expansion. At full employment, there is no cyclical unemployment. At a business cycle trough, cyclical unemployment is positive and the business cycle is peak. Cyclical unemployment is negative. The figure shows the unemployment rate in the United States between 1980 and 2013. It also shows the natural unemployment rate and cyclical unemployment. The natural unemployment rate in this figure was estimated by the Congressional Office, CBO. In figure during the most of the 1980s, the early 1990s, early 2000s, and during 2008-2009, unemployment was above the natural unemployment rate. So, cyclical unemployment was positive. Red sections of the line. You can also see that during the late 1980s, from 97 to 2001, that during 2005 and 2008, unemployment was below the natural unemployment rate. So, cyclical unemployment was negative. As real GDP minus potential GDP expressed as a percentage of potential gap fluctuates around a zero output gap in part B. Potential GDP is the value of real GDP when the economy is at full employment. All the economy's factors of production, labor, capital, land, and entrepreneurial ability are employed. Real GDP equals potential GDP when the economy is at full employment. Real GDP minus potential GDP expressed as a percentage of potential GDP is called the output gap. When the unemployment rate exceeds the natural unemployment rate, real GDP is below potential GDP and the output gap is negative. Red sections in both parts. When the unemployment rate is below the natural unemployment rate, real GDP is above potential GDP and the output gap is positive. The natural unemployment rate shows in the graph is the Congressional Budget Office's estimate. It might turn out to be a substantial underestimate of the years since 2008.